Hi, today I'm going to talk about something else. I'm not going to talk about Chairman Storman. Get fed up sometimes talking about that piece of crap. I outlined in a previous video that I would talk about the truth of the Druids and that I would share some of my unique knowledge with you on that subject. So I think I'll start this by describing a situation in Europe between, I would say, 6 and 7,000 years ago. Before the precursors of the Druids arrived, Europe was a land inhabited by a population that had made its way up through from the Caucasus, parts of Turkey, Anatolia, into Western Europe. When they got here, there was a population already living in Europe. They were, if you like, the European Aboriginals. Lots of them were descendants of the Cro-Magnons, who in lots of ways exhibited superior abilities and capacities to ourselves. These people, the European Aboriginals, lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle in small family groups and clans that were interconnected and allied to each other. Anyway, when the new migrants came into Europe, up from Anatolia and from the Caucasus, etc., they encountered these people and they had superior skills. They were farmers, they could work metals, and they ethnically cleansed the original European Aboriginals, who, though fair in skin and appearance, you could mistake them for white people. They were not whites, totally different. Anyway, with these people, they moved in, I would say, starting 5,000 years ago, and they built all the megaliths and structures such as Stonehenge, Avebury, the Barrows, lots of them, and that was their monumental, let us say, bequeathment of culture that we can still see of them. But at the same time, in the deepness of the Himalayas, the northern Himalayas, and on the central European steppes, there was a new migration happening. And this migration consisted of the Indo-Aryans, who started to migrate westward from the northern Himalayan mountains and the steppes into Europe. Now these people, these Indo-Aryans, all spoke a common language. They spoke a Proto-Indo-European language, which can still be identified through the words we speak today. All the European languages can be traced back to a single root. Anyway, these people started moving westward. Some stayed in what is now Eastern Europe and Russia. Some moved further on into the Mediterranean, Greece, the Balkans, Italy, others moved on into central France, and others into northern Europe, i.e. Germany and the Scandinavian countries. Over time, their languages started to differentiate, and what happened was that while all these common invasive migrants, if you like, who shared the same tongue, their languages started to differ to the point where they became unintelligible from the ancient Proto-Indo-European. So they couldn't communicate with each other directly. By this time, they in turn had ethnically cleansed the people from the Caucasus who had previously invaded to them, or they enslaved some, they might have intermarried with some, produced children, so their genetics are probably still around to this day. But the majority of people were the descendants of these Indo-European migrations or invasions, if you like. So they had this division of language, and alongside the division of language came differentiations in culture. So one group of people would develop the Slavic languages from the Indo-European populations, another evolved their languages into the Germanic languages, and others into the Romance, the Celtic, and other languages which are now dead, but all from a common source and from a common genetic makeup of these Indo-Europeans. Now, the group I'm going to talk about today, for now, are the Celts and their religion. Now, when you think of the Celts, you can't think of them in terms as a homogeneous group of peoples, very different to each other in lots of ways. We go back, let's say 5,000 years ago, they established big Celtic speaking areas in central Germany, Czechoslovakia, the Swiss Alps, France, and eventually in the UK through their migration into the UK. When they arrived here, they dispersed. Lots of them ended up in Ireland and Scotland, and they developed the Goidelic family of the Celtic language. England, Wales, Cornwall, etc. developed their own Brythonic languages, and right along the south coast of England, from Kent to Dorset, other groups spoke a Gaulish Celtic language from France and Belgium. So when they got here, they dispersed all over the islands of the UK, and they discovered the monoliths and the megaliths left by the previous, now ethnically cleansed people from the Caucasus, central Turkey, Anatolia, and they looked in wonder at them, and they adapted those monuments built by people who had no connection to them and who they had ethnically cleansed to suit their own religious needs. And what were the religious beliefs, you might ask, of these ancient peoples who'd come to the UK? In short, with the Celts in general, there was never a pantheon of gods like what developed in Greece or what developed in the Germanic areas of Europe with Wotan and Freya, etc. The Celts remained animists. They believed in the supernatural forces imbued in trees, streams, forests, and they believed that these sources were an inspiration of what they would call a mother goddess, the creator of all these things. So, in short, you will never see a pantheistic belief system with the Celts. It was all based on the land and what it meant to them and what supernatural forces were behind the objects they perceived in their very daily lives and what rituals they needed to perform to appease those forces. So from this, there developed a priesthood amongst the Celtic peoples, and I would say the strongest force behind this priesthood, if you like, was established in Great Britain. It was the powerhouse that was become the epicenter of the Druidic religion. You can still, to this day, if you like, visit Druidic groves. There's one near me which I go to quite frequently, not to worship because I'm a Christian. I'm a believer in the Holy Roman Apostolic Church. The Druids and the Celts, their population had at that time not been brought to the light of Christ. But I can still talk on this subject. I believe I have permission from our Lord Jesus Christ to inform you about the Druidic religion. So I'll continue. When they started off their religion, very similar to lots of other animistic religions, they formed shamans who would enact rituals for funerary events, for births, for deaths, for the coronation or the, let's say, election of a chieftain, and they would be always present on request to perform certain rites to make sure that these ceremonies went according to what they viewed as the forces of nature's requirements over them. From the shamans, they later developed a priesthood. Now this priesthood was a very harsh lifestyle for anyone to enter, if you like. In short, Druidic priests were picked from certain boys within the communities who exhibited, if you like, an otherworldliness, a perception of nature that was, even by their standards, and they were very extremely superstitious, Their lives are basically run by omens, that these people had been picked to be a priest. So what would they do with these young people? First thing they would do would be to kick them out of the community, tell them to go, that they needed to learn. And very much like the Spartans, they were cast out at a very early age, and they were left to their own devices to live or die. And in those days, wandering from one Celtic chieftain's domain to another could usually see you killed. So lots of them were killed in the process. But they hardened, and they learned, some of them, to survive. And they, being imbued with an awareness of nature and an ability to read signs and omens, they became valued by the communities that they wandered for years within. And overseeing this was a priesthood of Druids, and they would leave these youngsters to live or die. They would be shoeless, they would live in the woods, they would live off nature, they would either die of disease, starvation, they would freeze to death, but some of them made it through. And after many years of wandering round the different communities and administering to the different Celtic peoples' spiritual needs, they would learn knowledge. They would learn knowledge themselves. And this knowledge was a priori as far as the priesthood was concerned. It was not something that was taught. The knowledge was already in the person. They just had to bring it out of themselves. So eventually they became valued. They became sought after. But their vow of poverty, and it was a vow of poverty and obedience to the supernatural forces around them, meant that they would be discalced, they would be shoeless, they would be without human comfort, they would be, even though they were valued, they would still be considered to be outlawed, if you like, and as castaways from communities. They were welcome, but only for a little while before they had to move on. So the higher priests would hear of them. Eventually they would summon them in to their priesthood, and they would imbue them as Druids after many years. Could be in their 30s by then, before they were allowed into the Druidic priesthood. Once in, they would go out, and they would be by then a known Druid, and they would continue their work of meeting the spiritual needs of their communities. Now, when you think of these people, they were as hard as nails. They could fight, they could heal the sick, plenty of accounts of that, and they could imbue their spirituality upon others. From some of the accounts I'm aware of, they were capable of unbelievable supernatural phenomena. So this would go on all of their lives. It's believed that some of the arch-druids could live a couple of 100 years. How? I don't know. But that actually happened. So when you think of these these people, these ancient Druids. Don't think of Stonehenge. Don't think of those fat Welshmen in a Druid dress at their Eisteddfod. No connection between them. Now, this Druidic religion went on for a long time. Sometimes it would be perverted and they would perform human sacrifice. They would take part in the battles between the different chieftains on one side or another and engage in combat. They would never marry, they would never have children, they were always aloof, I should say, apart from society and feared by their communities in lots of ways. They would wander from Great Britain into France, into the Gaulish kingdoms, where they'd be welcomed. And they established in Great Britain, or Britain, they established cathedrals of Druidism in different places that I know of, which I'm not going to tell you where they are, because you attract too many new agey weirdos to those places who I can't stand, who want to recharge their crystals, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to relay that information. So there was one thing about these Druidic priests that I think is remarkable, is that when the Romans came here, their number one priority was to wipe out the Druidic religion and its priests, because they were absolutely terrified of them. Terrified to the point where they couldn't face or meet one. They would run as far as they could to get away from them. So the Romans knew something about the Druids that is lost to us in lots of ways. They were aware of certain powers that these Druidic priests had, which absolutely terrified them mortally. And what they did, they set about destroying every Druidic grove, meeting place, place of worship that they could find. And that went on through Gaul, went on through Britain, and the other lands where there were still Celtic populations who pertained to the Druidic religion. Romans absolutely terrified of them. They sent their legions, their best legions, to hunt them out, to kill them, to destroy them, to eradicate the Druidic religion wherever they went, with no mercy. Every Druid and anyone allied to the Druids was to be killed. The fear of them was immense, even more so than the persecution of the Jews in the Levant. The legions of Rome that were sent to Britain were the best they had. And the last stronghold of the Druids in Britain was at Ynys Mons in North Wales, and they levelled it, scorched earth. No one came out of that place alive. The Roman Empire needed to destroy that religion, the Druidic religion, as its priority. Lots of reasons for why this happened, lots of reasons to contemplate upon. But one thing you can say is that the Romans had a mortal fear of the Druidic religion, to the point where it was an obsession and something that the Roman Empire set out to do as a main priority. There was power within those people. I'm not going to talk about that in this video. This is part 1. I will get back to you and I will talk some more. Thank you.